The year is 1919. Clessie Cummins, along with William G. Irwin, who was a prominent baker, together would form Cummings Engine Company in Columbus, Indiana. Clessie Cummins was born the 27th of December, 1888. His parents worked the fields and were farmers, and this was before trucks and tractors. Farming is one of the hardest jobs out there. It's hard work now. It was even harder back then. Clessie Cummins would work the fields as a farm boy and wasn't much interested in school, but was interested in mechanics. He would build his very first engine at age 11, which was used to pump water at the family farm and was the talk of the town because Clessie was only 11 years old when he built this engine. Clessie would leave home a few years later with only an 8th grade education to take on odd jobs, just trying to get by until he would get a job at Nordyke and Marmon as a mechanic. Through a friend, Clessie Cummins would get the opportunity of a lifetime working in the pit crew for Ray Harron for the very first Indianapolis 500 at the Brickyard Speedway. Clessie was hired as an advisor as well as a member of the pit crew. Harron would win the Indianapolis 500 in a Marmon Wasp. The adrenaline rush from winning Indianapolis 500, even though Clessie wasn't the driver, but he was part of the team that won the very first race, set a fire inside of Clessie. Make no mistake, at this point, Clessie had the reputation for precision and honesty. A sponsor of Ray Harron, William G. Irwin, would offer Clessie a job to be his personal chauffeur as well as mechanic. Over the years, the relationship would blossom. It would grow from a boss-worker relationship to a friendship. William Irwin was impressed by Clessie Cummins' mechanical brilliance. Clessie built his very first gasoline-powered engine in 1915 in Irwin's garage. Sources conflict on the exact year, but it was either 1917 or 1918. Clessie would witness a diesel engine for the very first time. Upon witnessing, Clessie was floored over this oil-burning engine. He couldn't get enough or learn enough fast enough, becoming a bit obsessed. For those that don't know, the diesel engine was originally patented clear back in 1893 by Rudolf Diesel. The engine was originally called the Rational Heat Motor. And at first, diesel engines were absolutely huge, like factory-style engines. Diesel combustion engines are completely different than gasoline combustion engines. In a diesel engine, highly compressed hot air ignites the fuel instead of the spark igniting the fuel. Only air is initially introduced into the combustion chamber. The air is compressed to a ratio anywhere between 15:1 to 23:1. The high compression causes the temperature of the air to rise. At the top of the compression stroke, fuel is injected directly into the combustion chamber. Fuel injectors ensure that the fuel is broken down into small droplets as well as distributed evenly throughout the cylinders. The heat of the compressed air vaporizes the fuel from the surface of the droplets. The vapor is ignited by the heat from the compressed air in the combustion chamber. The combustion occurs at a substantially consistent pressure during the initial part of the power stroke. Anyway, Clessie, after seeing the diesel engine, was floored. And it woke up a passion inside of him. He wanted to put diesel on the map, baby. Clessie Cummins would partner with William G. Irwin, who put up $10,000 capital to fund the business. Cummins Engine Company was born. They would build their very first diesel engine under license, which they got from RM Hyvid Company, which was based in the Netherlands. Clessie would have one of the first diesel licenses in the USA. Cummins' first diesel engine was built in 1920, and it was this stationary engine type, which could be used as a water pump or to drive equipment on a farm. It made 8 horsepower, but Clessie wanted to build his own diesel engine, and that was the goal at this point in time. In 1921, Clessie would apply and received patents for improved fuel delivery as well as improved manifolding techniques. Clessie would achieve his goal in 1924 with his built-from-scratch Cummins diesel engine called the Model F, which was a marine engine. The engine sold modestly well. Clessie sold his engines through Sears and Roebuck magazines, which was the Amazon of its day. Sears and Roebuck sold everything from watches to houses. Yes, you could buy a Sears house and they would ship it to you by train, and it would include everything. The engines were sold, but when the farmers who bought these engines were done with them for the season, they would just return the engines and get their money back. Yes, they even did that back then as well as now. Irwin wasn't impressed because at this point he had over $100,000 in the company and was looking to get a little bit of return on investment. In 1929, Clessie would build an inline four-cylinder of his very own design and would fit the motor into a Packard. And he would take the Packard on tours and different demonstrations and drum up some interest. But a few weeks later, the stock market crashed, and what interest there was in the diesel engine subsided. Bankruptcy was looking like a real thing that could happen at any point in time. In December of 1929, Clessie would hear that famed British racer Kane Don was going to be setting some land speed records at Daytona Beach, Florida. Clessie would get a Packard Roadster. He would fit it with one of his diesel engines and drove from Columbus, Indiana to Daytona Beach, Florida in an attempt to get the word out about his diesel engines. It took Clessie 7 days to get to Daytona. You have to remember, there wasn't an interstate system during this time. The interest was out of this world. On their 1,275-mile trip, they averaged 40 miles to the gallon. Round trip, 2,550 miles, and burned $4.75 in fuel, which was incredible. And it got the truck people talking about the use of diesel in trucks for trucking. There were a few that made their way into trucks, but the word about the new engine wasn't getting out at the rate that Clessie was hoping. Despite glowing reports of fuel mileage and the ability to haul heavy loads long distances, to try and get the word out, Clessie did a coast-to-coast run in the Packard touring car, which experienced some issues, but nothing major, but didn't get the inception Clessie was hoping for. So Clessie, not one to throw the towel in, went up to Auburn, Indiana, which was just up the road from Columbus, Indiana, where Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg was. Clessie contracted the Duesenberg brothers to build him a race car chassis to compete at the Indianapolis 500. Clessie would fit the race car with an engine from his marine line, the Model U, inline four-cylinder, 3 valves per cylinder, makes 85 horsepower at 361 cubic inch displacement, which was inside the Indianapolis 500 parameters, which couldn't be any bigger than 6 liters or 366 cubic inch displacement. Clessie would take the car to Daytona Beach to try to set some speed records and dial it in a little bit more, and would set the land speed record of over 100 miles per hour. Fun fact, the car was never trailered. It drove to all of the events. Even when it was cold outside, the car was heavy at 3,386 pounds, which was a lot for a race car back then. It was the second heaviest at this event. Dave Ernest would clock 96 miles per hour in the qualifying laps. Dave Ernest would place 13th place in the race with an average speed of 86 miles per hour. Dave Ernest did the whole race without stopping, 500 miles without stopping for fuel. The race generated publicity but not sales, and sales is what they desperately needed, so Irwin was convinced that Europe could be the answer. Both Irwin and Clessie would take the car to France, Italy, Switzerland, and England to demonstrate the car. And there were orders, but it wasn't the explosion of sales that the two had hoped for. But it did plant seeds and generated huge interest for an alternative fuel source. In 1932, Kensworth offered Cummins diesel engines as an option for the very first time. It was also the very first time a manufacturer offered a diesel engine installed from the factory on a commercial class truck. The engine was the model HA4 in line 4 that made 100 horsepower. Before Kensworth went public, Clessie would do a coast-to-coast run in a diesel truck. He had two other mechanics that would do the run with him. The truck was shipped to New York City, and the three would meet there. The truck was a special-built truck with two beds in the back, extra parts, stove, food, and supplies. Clessie was able to work a deal with Continental Oil Company to supply fuel and lubricants, as well as one hot meal per person each day. All was going great until they hit southern Illinois, where the cooling system sprung a leak. They were able to patch it with some shingles they found from a roadside shack and was able to limp it back to Missouri. They also had a near-death experience near Cajon Pass, Barstow, California, coming down a steep grade. The brakes gave out. Clessie at the wheel, frantically downshifting to try to slow the speed of the truck down because at the bottom of the hill was a train. They barely missed the train, and this incident stuck with Clessie throughout his whole life. They did the cross-country run in 97 hours 20 minutes, beating the previous record of 103 hours 59 minutes, with the average speed being 33 miles per hour, achieving 15.75 miles to the gallon. Unlike all of the previous other attempts to get widespread media coverage, this stunt did it. The interest was huge. Orders were pouring in from interstate trucking companies for the Cummins engines. They went from making 10 engines a month to making 100 engines per month. Clessie would make an all-new engine design called the Model A, which was a 6-cylinder unit with aluminum block and an aluminum head, which really helped out in the weight department. Clessie would put the engine in a 1935 Auburn. Auburn wanted to be an early adopter of the diesel engine, and Clessie wanted a fresh marketing stunt to get the word out about his diesel engines. Clessie would drive the Cummins-powered Auburn from New York to California, and this time he had a film crew to film it, and that's why we have all of this footage. Clessie made stops along the way, clocking over 100 miles per hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats. Total trip was 3,774 miles, averaging 35 to 40 miles to the gallon. Fuel cost for the entire trip was $7.65, which would equate to you spending $175.18 in the year 2024. Clessie would keep that car until being cut off by a Model T in 1937. The car was totaled, but the engine survived. It's worth mentioning Cummins was contracted to build 8 base model 4-door Auburns to have Cummins Model A engines put in, but Cummins would ultimately cancel the contract with Auburn when the company was being investigated by the Foreign Exchange. Clessie would keep all of the cars and fit them with engines. Clessie would also put a Cummins Model A engine in his personal V12 Cadillac, removing the V12 and putting the Model A engine in it, and then he would take it on trips. J. Irwin Miller, the great-nephew of W.G. Irwin, would become the general manager of Cummins and would lead the company to prominence for the next 4 decades. In 1941, Cummins would offer the industry first 100,000-mile warranty just in time for World War II, which really put Cummins engines through its paces, used in all different climates from the tropics to the sub-Antarctic conditions, powering not just vehicles but vessels as well. After the war, sales would explode, which led to company growth. In the 50s, Clessie was semi-retired, and he had a chair on the board, but he never really liked the desk job, so he quit his own company in 1955. He was able to keep some of the key patents and formed a new company called Cummins Enterprises. Then he would move on to Allison Engine Division. Clessie would continue to innovate until his death. Remember back to the near-death experience back in California that Clessie had. That incident stuck with him his whole entire life. He would design and patent the very first compression release engine brake to combat brake fade and brake overheating after long hill descents. Clessie originally offered it to Cummins, his old company, but Jacobs would be the company that he would partner with. The product was sold under Jake Brake. Clessie Cummins would die in 1968 at the age of 79. His original Cummins engine company would go on without him in the 50s, but as they say, that's another story for another day. All right, now it's time for Would You Rather. But instead of the Would You Rather today, do you have any cool early pre-1950s Cummins engine stories? Put them in the comment section below. Now it's time for Name That Tune, and a little bit different today. I'm going to sing a line, and then you tell me what comes next. I'm alone, yeah, I don't know if I can face the night. So, not looking for the name of the band, but you could put the name of the band if you'd like, or song title. Just what is the next line that comes after that? In the comment section. First person to do it will have their comment pinned to the top. Thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below. Or check out our Facebook group that correlates with this YouTube channel. If you don't have Facebook and would still like to reach me, send me an email at what_its_like@yahoo.com. Thanks again for everything that you guys bring in the comment section. And until next time, toodaloo! If you're still here, here's a little bit of a tidbit. That is an Aerosmith song, and I want to try to do my best impression of an Aerosmith yell.